Well, I ironed it at 350 on, some of the most dramatic video you've ever seen, I'm sure. And wiped it down with MEK. I got my blower going because there's just now a lot of solvents in the air, not like when I was just gluing. Next up is the poly brush. It's thinned per the instructions. It's a nice Pepto-Bismol-ish pink. And the idea is to get enough that you fill in the weave and soak through and fill it in from the backside so everything sticks, kind of encapsulates the fabric. So that means you're going to get some runs down the back according to the manual. That's normal, so you see how that's a run on the surface. But you don't want to have any dry areas. Basically, you go over, put it on and tip it, and then it'll be done. And you can see here, see the runs starting to form on the back. Actually a good thing. That's on the circuit. No, that's on the back. The runs on the back are not supposed to hurt anything. Wet, it's not dry and starved for filler. You can see where I got the glue because it stays kind of clear, it doesn't get that pink behind it. Okay, rather than move the camera around so you can watch me paint the other side, I'll just leave it here so you can watch it dry. How's that sound for excitement? No? Okay, we'll just shut it off. So next up are the patches for inspection holes and the gas cap and the drain here for the sump and the fuel tank, and then of course the all the seams and the ribs. So patches are pretty straightforward. They like to call them doilies in the manual. Where else do you get to talk about doilies and pinking shears and irons and things like that without losing your man card, right? So the idea is to get the good wet coat of poly brush on. You take your patch or doily if you prefer, a little bit more on the top, and spread it out. This is some pre-shrunk material. It's already been shrunk at 250 degrees. I made it, instead of making a full circle, I made it half round and extended it a bit to let it run into the off the edge and under this tape, so that's just a little less unfinished area. Looks like I managed to get a piece of the wrinkle in it here. Well, we can touch that up with a 250 iron and make it shrink. That's a stubborn one. I didn't notice that when I cut that out. I had a wrinkle in that. I don't know how I got it. Well, the easy solution, start over. It's not that important a piece of material. So I'll cut out a new one, essentially the same shape, and glue it on there, and it'll look better, trust me. So here's a situation where you get to get a little creative. This, I believe, is a marine fitting, but it fits inside the filler neck on the tank, and there's a rubber hose around both pieces. There's a clamp down at the tank, and then there's a clamp just under here. You may have noticed when in the deconstruction there's just an ugly mess of silicone that somebody done, because basically you need to get underneath here to tighten up the hose clamp and then do something to make it neat. So what I did is this fabric here, this doily, reinforcement, whatever you want to call it, is glued to the back of this ring, and then I cut a little bit of a notch there in the original fabric, and if I push on it I could get the head of, or get the end of a socket onto that thing and tighten up the hose clamp. When the hose clamp is tight, I just need to glue this fabric down and it'll look tolerable, I hope. So we'll glue it and see what happens. And to glue it, I'll just hold it back, put the poly brush on, and then smooth it all out. I wanted to make provisions for an inspection hole right here. This is right over the sending unit for the fuel tank, just in case it ever does leak someday. God forbid. Maybe I'll sell the airplane if it does. I don't know. But anyhow, that's the center. I marked off the location for this plastic ring, glued it on with the poly tack, and it just takes a minute to set up. Now I've got a pre-cut doily here, cut out with pinking shears from pre-ironed, pre-shrunk fabric. How's that if I get all those words into one? Okay. The Stitz manual recommends just tracing around a gallon can. Personally, I just preferred to I made a bunch of these in different sizes. This is a 6.5 inch. I use the Fiber One 90-calorie brownie box. Those are, when you get to be my age, fiber is a good thing, so whatever. There's a plug for that. How's that? I wonder if they'll give me any money for advertising their brownies. Not likely. Okay, so anyhow, I'm going to wet this down with poly brush. If I don't knock the can over. Get a fairly good coat. Then we'll set our doily on it. It's fairly wet, so and then before it has a chance to dry. And there is a pencil ring kind of marked out there. And with a little working of the brush, I can get that to work in pretty good usually. And then after this dries, we'll give it another brush coat of poly brush over the top just to make sure that it's, the weave is filled, so we don't get a problem with it sucking up the next coat or something of the poly spray or the. I'm going to call that good. And over here is the ring around the fuel tank filler. The plane of the filler doesn't quite match the curve of the fabric, so you get some issues right there. But all in all, it certainly looks better than what was there. As long as I'm here, I guess I can give that the second coat. And I'll put another ring on the bottom just to have it there, so it's all finished, and if I ever need it near the tank outlet, I'll have the ring. I can cut it out, but I'm not going to cut it out now. I'm just going to hang the wing and fly it. I've got the 1/2-inch reinforcing tape from Polyfiber. That just came in from Peachtree today, so we're going to end it here, start it here. I've got a line drawn essentially 1/4 inch away from the edge of from the center of the rib. This is 1/2-inch tape. If I was doing rib stitching, you want the tape to cover the entire width of the ribs, and I'd put two layers of this, or 2 pieces side by side to cover the entire rib. But since I'm just putting the rivets in, a single layer will do the job. So if I start the tape where the other tape stopped and follow my line down, and I've got the lines across to tell me where the rivets are. I want it straight, not crooked. So I can peel off a length, line it up down here, and pull on it so it's pulled straight, and then just stick them down. I've got the wide head rivets. Now, Polyfiber recommends putting a small metal washer under these rivets, but the original aircraft didn't use those. The original kit, they weren't supplied, as near as I can tell, and the aircraft was built without them. So again, I'm going with what has worked on this airplane. So I'm setting up the next one. I've got the old tape. This is the top outboard. That's a forward edge. I can line this up with the original holes and kind of make sure that I've got all the right holes. I haven't missed any. Whoever taped this the first time didn't get it very straight. You can see this rivet was only half on the tape, but it tells me that I've got all the holes marked. One issue here, you really want about an inch of tape. An inch is about a thumb's worth. Inch of tape beyond the last rivet or last stitch. This is a little short, so I'll extend that a bit. I'll go up, make sure I'm up at least an inch. And since I have this gusset, triangular gusset riveted in here, I can bring it right up to there and end it there, and that'll give me a good transition. So I've drawn my line to mark the edge of the tape, so that the tape will be centered on the rib. But as I get down here, I showed you the problems with the other tape. I kind of faked it here. You can see there's 2 lines. I'm going to kind of curve that in and run it just a little bit more inboard, so that these pop rivets down here fall closer to the center of the tape. I think that's probably more important than exactly centering the tape for both appearance and for structural reasons. So I want to at least go an inch beyond that top hole. So I'm going to start it up here, right at the bottom of that piece. I can pull off a fair amount of backing here as I go, and just pull it straight and push it down to here's where I'm going to mooch it over a bit. If I had 3 hands, I could have panned the camera as I worked, right? So I'll get that straight is nice. In keeping with the learn from my mistakes theme about this video, I wanted to get in there and touch that. I decided to experiment with a soldering iron, and it works quite well. I like this. I can get a nice clean hole. Slides right in, pops right in, and I think we're going to go with that for the rest of the job. Again, I never claim to be an expert. And I did say we will learn from my mistakes. There we go. Okay. Okay, so I've got the reinforcing tapes and the pop rivets in. I've put several coats of poly brush on them so that they're good and soaked. Because you don't want them, robbing the vinyl from the next layer of tape. So putting these tapes on is a three-step process. First step is you put on a coat of poly brush, let it dry. Next we'll put on a wet coat of poly brush, lay the tape into the poly brush, and make sure it's soaking in from the bottom. So I make sure I got enough poly brush to hold it, and then when that dries we'll give it another coat over the top. There's a little bit of funkiness going on up here because this just nicks this tape. I got 2-inch tape. I'm going to put a 2-inch tape centered over the reinforcing, and then another 2-inch tape over here for the overlap seam. If I had wider tape I could just do it in one shot, but I don't have any, and for this little bit it just didn't seem worth buying another whole roll of tape or cutting it out, so I'll do it in 2 pieces. I got my thin poly brush. Put it on fairly heavy. All the way down. And I'll know if I got enough when I put the tape in place, and if it soaks through as I put it, then I got enough. If it doesn't, then I need to put more.
I'm sorry. Okay, on the other joints I drew a line. Make sure this is straight. This one I didn't. I'm going to continue right now. We're going to eyeball this one. So I got the reinforcing tape underneath, which is pretty straight. Trust me, you forget a step, right? There we go. That's what I like to see. Nice and Pepto-Bismol pink.
I guess I got a little too ambitious trying to go too far too fast. And down at the bottom I'll use straight scissors instead of pinking shears to trim it, because the bottom edge is going to go underneath another tape. So I'll trim that off with straight scissors. Move that out of the way.
Take a dry-ish brush and kind of work it in where I need to. Again, the better thing to do would be to have drawn a line. I thought I went around and drew lines on all of these, but apparently all of them except this one.
Okay, so that's that tape. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll put the tape down here next to it. But while I'm letting that dry, I'm going to move on to the tape on the corner. Okay, so for putting the tape on here where it's going to wrap around and I have this curve, I think I can just wrap the tape. I'm not 100% sure. So I got my iron on standby there with set at about 250, so if I have to just touch the tape and shrink it a little bit here, we can do that. Other than that, it's going to be pretty much the same procedure. What I'm going to do is I'll just glue it, down the front first, the whole way down, and then I'll wrap it around and see what it looks like, shrink it if necessary, and then I'll glue it to the side. I could have used bias tape here. That would have made it easy. Just poking in by hand, I'm not seeing a problem with that curve. I'm just going to lay it down and see what happens. And if I have to, I'll just touch it with the iron.
And the other beauty of this is out of sight, out of mind, right? On the butt rib, you never see it.
I'm getting more fabric than I really like there. So I will resort to the iron just a little. Okay, to cover up the glued seam where the top fabric came around and overlapped the bottom fabric, I'm going to use bias tape because it has a bit of a curve to it, and bias tape is good for curvy things. Basically, what is bias tape? You probably can't see it real well, but you can see the seam right here running at a 45-degree angle. Basically, this tape is cut from the cloth at 45-degree angles, so the threads are running this way and that way in the cloth instead of running lengthwise and crosswise. And since you're cutting it from diagonally, you encounter these seams pretty regularly. Since the seam was right at the end of the roll where I was starting, I just cut it off so I don't have to deal with it. But it's very stretchy. You can see if I pull, I can stretch it, and you can see how it thins out. As I distort those threads, I can stretch it this way. And because it has that flexibility, I can make it conform to some pretty wild shapes. So nothing wild here, but I will use the bias tape just to make my life simpler. And
then we'll just get a nice wet coat. And I got a piece here with a notch cut out for that fitting. It could have been a little lighter. Peel it back, put it back down, that's better.
you want the stuff to soak through from the back. If you put it on the top, it might look good, but you're going to get, there's no guarantee that you really soaked through. When it soaks up to it from the back, then you know you've got good adhesion all the way.
And I'm just going to follow the curve as we go.
And I can just make that turn without any bubbles or wrinkles or anything, because it just doesn't have the strength with the rigidity, I should say, not strength, that the straight cut tape has. It's pretty flexible stuff because it can move on that bias. Regarding the Spanwise tapes, for the trailing edge, I've had problems with the paint cracking right along here, where especially in this inboard bay where it gets beat up by the propeller. So I want my tape. I have a glued seam, and I want to overlap that glued seam, and I want to carry the tape, beyond this edge here a little bit, so I get a little reinforcement there and reduce the chances of the paint cracking. So I basically took a piece of fabric, made a tape out of it, folded it in half, ironed a crease in it so I can fit it nicely. I've got a slit in it for the aileron fitting, and we can, it's the same process here. I'll put the tape on with that crease on the trailing edge, and we'll glue it down, and then we'll do some of the other tapes. That crease gives me a nice guide to make sure that I put it where I think it should go, or originally about, get it even. Further, there we go. This is one of my problem areas from before. It's hard part getting down here. Right along here is the edge of the fuel tank. You might be able to see it. The edge of the fuel tank's there. It's not very far below the fabric. and there were the bars welded on the bottom if you saw it from the earlier videos. I tapered the ends of those. I put anti-chafe tape on it and stuff, but just to, you know, belt and suspenders, I'm going to put a tape across here just to hopefully stave off any future chafing or problems with this. And this is my glued seam here, where I, you know, put this big patch on the existing fabric. I got a line of rivets here. I really should have bought a roll of wider tape. Oh well. So I'll put a layer of tape over the rivets and let it extend somewhat beyond the edge of the leading edge here, this far, you know, so I get a double layer right at that transition, and then I'll put another piece here, just like I did over on the side. You want the tape to come out about 3/8 of an inch past the hard line of the, you know, change in structure, underlying structure. I'll let that dry for a minute. I can give another coat because I don't want to, you know, have this steal away the vinyl that I need for the next layer to stick. Okay, so this is the last tape on the bottom of the wing. This is where it's real easy to get into trouble. You know, you're getting to the point where you're thinking, you know, I'm almost there. Just blow some poly spray and some color on it, and I go flying. You know, I made the comment earlier, I should have bought some wider tape, you know, and then, well, this will work, it's okay. You don't want to get into the mentality that you know, you're going to make it work, it'll be fine, don't worry about it, just go on. You really want to think about it. In this case, it will work, it is fine, you know, because I've got the tape over here that covers the rivet heads with its chafing. It overlaps the edge of the leading edge so I don't get cracking in the finish here. This tape along here will give me my tape over that glued seam. So it's all good. You know, it's cosmetically it's not quite as perfect as it would be, but this is a point, you know, at least for me, where I can get into a rush and, you know, get their itis, you know, the #1 killer of pilots, as you probably know. So, nothing new and exciting with this last one. And I've got one more on the upper edge in the same place. And then I can go over the all of these tapes with iron at 225 to get out any lumps, because again, it's easier to get lumps out now than it will be, you know, after I put poly spray and all those other things on it. Now is the time. Okay, so here we've got just a bit of a wrinkle here. I'm going to try and get rid of that. There's other, you know, like there's bubbles around these rivets. That's a given, you know. There's not much you can do about those bubbles. As long as you got ½ an inch of good stuck down tape on the edges here, you're good. You know, the tape isn't going anywhere. It just kind of fares out the rivets. That's the way it is. So I got my 225 iron. So we'll get in here and we'll just get in here with a tip and a little pressure, and you know, it's going to shrink the fabric a little bit, and it'll soften the glue up underneath. Around the side here. you don't want to take a 250 or hotter iron and just lay it on the tapes, because it'll soften up the glue and shrink the tape, and the tape will literally just bow in like that. Ask me how I know.
You can fly around with these little spots all day long and you're not going to do much damage. And that's, I'm going to call that gone. I mean, almost. Yeah.
Now this lump, I can't do anything about that. That was from, when the ring was molded. I normally try to remember to trim those off. You can feel them when you buy the ring. Oh well, that's what you get for being in a rush. But basically, I'm going to go around the entire repair area on all of the tapes. Anywhere like there's a bit of a tape sticking up, you can just get in there and iron it right down, bear everything in. Any runs, this will, it'll soften them up and smoosh them out. And then, it's just time better spent now cleaning up the mess than having to deal with it after you got the color on and deciding, gee, it looks like crap and I should do something. So, there it is. Here I've got a bubble. I don't know how obvious it is, but from feel, I can feel it's real obvious. It won't completely match color-wise. It'll still be lighter, even if I do get it mooshed down. But yeah, mooshed down it is. Here's a couple drips. Kind of just smoosh those. Use technical terms here, right? Smoosh and moosh. I don't want to. Yeah, that's flat now. And I'm just going around feeling things. Your hands will tell you a lot. Looking for lumps in all the wrong places, or however that song goes. I got some blobby stuff here. If we can't soften that out and smooth it out, you really don't want to sand the poly brush. It's pretty rubbery. Let's see what we can do with the iron. That's a little bit of an improvement there. Okay, well, I'm moving faster than I can move the camera, so I'm going to shut the camera off. I think you got the idea that, lumps of dried glue, bubbles, wrinkles, tip of the iron, a little pressure, a little bit of heat, it'll kill them, and not too much heat. Don't spread the iron around the whole tape, because you will shrink it. One last thing before we break out the spray gun, drain grommets. I marked the location for the holes. I've got some C-plane grommets. You'll see those in just a second. Again, I'm just going to use a soldering iron, melt the hole. Since this is the bay with the fuel tank in it, I'm going to put 2 grommets just to let it ventilate better. So there's one of the grommets. It probably doesn't show up well on camera because it's clear plastic. I'll take some poly tack, spread it on the, I really should be wearing gloves, but I'll spread it on the surface, stick it in place the right way. Goes that way. Okay. So I can give it a good coat of poly tack, put it over that hole I just burned or melted, get it facing aft and centered, and that's that. And when I spray, it'll get sprayed with the appropriate color. I've gone through and put a second coat on all of the tapes, so I should be good there. Of course, just looking things over one last time, I spotted a couple more things to fix with the iron. I'll take care of those. And Those both line up nicely with the edge of the trailing edge. And I think we're ready to talk about spray guns. So I sprayed 2 coats of poly brush, 2 cross coats of poly spray. This is the last coat of poly spray going on. A couple comments on that. When you spray that first coat of silver here, the poly spray, you can go into the house thinking that you're God's gift to polykind, and then when you come back out, of course, then the silver does a beautiful job of showing up every little imperfection in your work, from a ragged cut, or a couple loose threads on the edge of the fabric, to any dust specks that you missed with a tack rag. Just about anything. It's wonderful. It just all pops right out at you. Fortunately for me, I'm going to be finishing this in the white polytone. It's flat, it's white, it won't show up. It'll look better than the silver, okay? If you're doing this, obviously, planning a dark blue urethane color or something like that, you're going to have to be really, really, really picky. Any edges of the tape that have come up, well, those you can iron down with the parchment paper and parchment paper and an iron. Use paper underneath it so it doesn't stick to the silver and cause problems. Some dust specks you can kind of sand out. Be real careful with sanding. If there's a hard spot anywhere where you've got some structure underneath, a couple swipes of the sandpaper and you're right through. So you got to be real careful with that. That's explained in the manual. Probably rather than scissors, a better thing to do would be use a rotary cutter and a straight edge for all your cutting. You have to cut it on the airplane. I'm thinking, I haven't tried this, but this is my thinking if I ever do this again, a strip of poster board, taped into place underneath it, tape the straight edge into place, use the rotary cutter and see how that works. You get a straight edge, because it really shows through amazingly well. The silver really highlights any irregularities. So I sanded it, I tack clothed it, I cleaned up what I could. Things like a ragged edge on fabric, obviously it's too late. I'm not going to take the whole thing off to fix that. So, okay, with that, I think I'm going to get to spraying. Okay, that's right. Okay, at this point, we're ready to put some white on it. It's been tacked. I didn't sand this last coat, for the manual. I did sand it over here to feather the edge where I had it masked off, and I moved my masking over so I don't get as thick of build-up lump right at that edge. The thickness of the edge is only going to be the color, not the color plus the gray. Not much else to say. When I start here, I'm going to spray the butt rib first, so the overspray from the butt rib, doesn't end up in fresh wet paint here. And I'll hit these up here as well at first, and then I'll spray the main body. One disadvantage of the way I got it set up right now is the leading edge is just a few inches off the floor, so I guess I have to lay on the ground to get that the very bottom part. But that's life in the big city, right? Okay, so that's pretty much it for the fabric repair. There it is. She wasn't a beauty queen to begin with, not a beauty queen now, but it looks pretty good. You can see a pretty heavy contrast between the clean white new paint and the old dirty paint, but what are you going to do? A few things before I sign off. You probably saw me with wearing this. This is fine for poly spray, poly brush, poly tone, poly whatever. The charcoal does a pretty good job of sucking up the toluene and MEK and whatever else is in there. And when it does finally load up, you start to notice the smell pretty quickly. And this is my second set of cartridges on this particular job, so that's fine. If you're spraying polyurethane, this doesn't cut it. Polyurethane has a very poor warning properties, to use the euphemism from the all grip literature. You really do need an outside source of air, so keep that in mind. Spray guns. High volume, low pressure is all the rage nowadays. I don't have one of those. I've got my venerable Binks Model 95. It's a wonderful gun. I love this gun. It's the old school high pressure, low volume. You get a lot of overspray, so you waste more material than you do with the low pressure, high volume system. What I would do, though, is caution you. This stuff is pretty forgiving. You can get away with a lot, and I'm really rusty. I'm just about getting my hand back, my eye back. Doing this much. If you haven't spray painted before, don't take the gun and point it at your airplane and pull the trigger and see what happens. Do a little practice first, even if it means wasting some material. And the other thing is, you saw in the very beginning of the first video, I was using gloves from Harbor Freight. I shop there a fair amount, but when it comes to spray guns, no. It doesn't cut it. I used to paint cars, and I've seen a lot of cars fall victim to a cheap spray gun, and it's just not a pretty sight, so invest in something decent. You don't necessarily need to get something like my Binks, but the Harbor Freight Northern Tool $80 spray gun, somehow I can't believe it's going to be better than the old Sears crap that I've seen that just sucked. separator and regulator is mounted here, right close to where I'm working, so I got a fairly short length of hose. So I got pressure at the gun, not pressure over there at the compressor. I think that's about it. I just need to put the wing on, and I'm going to rerun all the fuel lines from the butt rib there down to the new. I got a new fuel selector, and that'll run to the gascolator, so it'll all be hard aluminum tubing instead of the 1/4-inch rubber lines that are currently running through the cockpit and just make me uncomfortable. I should remind you again, I ain't no A&P. Whatever you do, hit this. That's where it's at. Buy this, read it, cover to cover a couple times. You know, there's stuff in here that I didn't mention. There's things I did I probably shouldn't have done. If you saw a mistake that I made, make a comment down below. You know, for my benefit in the future and for the benefit of anybody else who's watching this. And of course, if you've got a better way of doing it, again, a comment at least. You know, let's help the next guy out, even if it's too late for me, or perhaps I'm beyond hope. I think that's it. So if you're still watching this, if you're that one guy who hung on to the bitter end, thank you so much. I hope you found this useful. Learn from my mistakes, and hope you get a good job doing your fabric. Thanks. Bye.